Carl Jung explained, the unbreakable bond of two aligned souls. There is a moment in the life of the soul when the ordinary world falls silent, when the familiar rhythms of attraction and desire suddenly reveal themselves as mere echoes of something far more ancient and profound. It arrives without warning, this recognition, like lightning illuminating a landscape you never knew existed within you. One moment you are walking the well-worn paths of your constructed life, and the next you find yourself standing at the threshold of a mystery that has been calling your name since before you learned to speak. Jung knew this moment intimately. He understood that beneath the surface of our daily encounters with others lies a deeper current, a river of connection that flows not from personality to personality, but from soul to soul. This is not the love that poets celebrate in their verses about spring mornings and stolen glances. This is something else entirely, something that emerges from the depths of the collective unconscious, like a whale surfacing from oceanic darkness, carrying with it the wisdom of millennia and the weight of eternal truths. When two souls are destined to align, the call comes first as whisper, then as thunderclap. It speaks in the language that predates words, the vocabulary of symbols that Jung spent his lifetime decoding. You might feel it in a dream that refuses to fade with morning light, or in the way a stranger's laugh carries harmonics that resonate in chambers of your being you didn't know existed. The rational mind, that faithful guardian of the ego's territory, scrambles to explain these phenomena with familiar concepts, coincidence, projection, biochemical attraction. But the soul knows better. The soul recognizes its own. This recognition transcends the superficial magnetism that draws moth to flame. It is not the desperate hunger of incompleteness seeking its missing piece, but rather the profound acknowledgement of wholeness encountering its complement. Jung understood that we are not incomplete beings searching for our other half. We are whole universes discovering another cosmos with which we can dance in perfect gravitational harmony, each maintaining our own orbit while participating in something greater than ourselves. The call from the depths carries with it the signature of the archetypal realm. When it sounds, we suddenly find ourselves participating in a story that has been told since the first human beings looked up at the stars and wondered about their place in the cosmic order. We become Psyche searching for Eros, Persephone called, to her underworld transformation, the wandering hero who finally glimpses home on the distant horizon. Our personal narrative becomes interwoven with the golden threads of myth, and we understand that what we are experiencing is both utterly unique and timelessly universal. But this call is not a gentle invitation. It arrives as summons, demanding nothing less than total transformation. The ego, comfortable in its familiar patterns and well-defended territories, recoils from such radical change. It offers reasonable alternatives. Perhaps this is simply an intense infatuation that will pass, or a psychological projection that therapy can resolve. The ego knows instinctively that responding to this call will require the death of who you thought you were and the birth of who you might become. And death, even symbolic death, is never undertaken lightly. Jung wrote extensively about the nigredo, the darkening that must precede any authentic transformation. When the call from the depths sounds, it often arrives cloaked in shadow, carrying with it not just the promise of union, but the certainty of dissolution. The life you have carefully constructed, the identity you have spent decades crafting, the very foundations of your understanding about love and relationship, all of this must be placed upon the altar of becoming. The soul bond demands nothing, less than everything. In the depths of the collective unconscious, where personal history gives way to universal pattern, the archetype of the divine lovers stirs to life. This is not the romantic fantasy of popular culture, but something far more profound and demanding. The divine lovers represent the sacred marriage of opposites, the conjunctio that alchemists sought to achieve in their laboratories of transformation. When this archetype constellates in your life, you are no longer simply seeking a partner. You are being called to participate in the cosmic process of creation itself. The recognition often comes accompanied by a sense of homecoming so profound. It brings tears to eyes that have forgotten how to cry. You look into the face of this other soul and see not a stranger, but the one you have been unconsciously seeking through every failed relationship, every moment of loneliness, every night you lay awake, wondering if you were destined to walk this path alone. Here, finally, is the one who speaks your native language, not the language of your birth country or your learned culture, but the original tongue of your deepest self. Yet this homecoming is simultaneously an exile from everything you once knew about love. The comfortable patterns of romantic attachment reveal themselves as elaborate defenses against the very intimacy you thought you were seeking. The games of pursuit and retreat, the careful maintenance of mystery and distance, the strategic withholding, and calculated revelations, all of these familiar rituals crumble in the face of soul recognition. You are called to love without strategy, to be intimate without armor, to show yourself without the protective filters of persona. Jung understood that the persona, the mask we wear in social situations, serves a vital function in helping us navigate the world of others. But when the call from the depths sounds, the persona becomes not just inadequate, but actively harmful. It stands between you and the very recognition you have been seeking. The soul bond cannot flourish in the artificial atmosphere of pretense. It requires the oxygen of authenticity, the clear air of truth, the naked honesty of being exactly who you are without apology or explanation. This stripping away of pretense is both liberation and terror. Without the familiar protection of your social masks, you stand exposed not just to this other soul, but to yourself. You see clearly, perhaps for the first time, the vast landscapes of your inner world, the beautiful valleys of your deepest dreams, the dark forests of your hidden fears, the snow-peaked mountains of your highest aspirations. And you see that this other soul is not looking away from any of it. They are not loving you despite your shadows, but precisely because of your wholeness, darkness, and light intertwined. The call from the depths comes with its own timing, following rhythms that have nothing to do with our personal plans or preferences. Jung wrote about kairos, the right time, the opportune moment when the universe aligns to make possible what was previously impossible. The soul bond often arrives at moments when we least expect it and are perhaps least prepared for it. It comes when we have just settled into solitude, or when we are committed to other relationships, or when we have declared ourselves ready to give up on love entirely. The psyche, it seems, has its own sense of humor about such things. This timing is not coincidental, but purposeful. The soul bond requires a certain level of psychological development to be truly received. We must have traveled far enough along the path of individuation, Jung's term for the lifelong process of becoming who we truly are, to recognize authenticity when we encounter it. We must have made sufficient peace with our own shadows to not flee from the darkness we glimpse in another. We must have developed enough relationship with our own depths to trust the mysterious currents that flow beneath the surface of conscious awareness. The call often comes disguised as ordinary encounter. You meet at a bookstore, at a conference, through mutual friends in the mundane circumstances of daily life. But beneath the surface of this seemingly random meeting, archetypal forces are at work. The trickster has arranged this encounter. The wise old man has guided your paths to convergence. The great mother has woven your stories together in her infinite tapestry. What appears to be chance is actually the manifestation of deep pattern, the visible expression of invisible orchestration. When the recognition dawns, it often comes with a flood of impossible knowing. You understand things about this person that should take months or years to discover. You see not just who they are, but who they are becoming, who they have always been, beneath their own accumulated layers of protection and pretense. This knowing is not psychic phenomenon, but psychological recognition, the part of you that exists beyond ego boundaries, acknowledging its counterpart in another soul. Jung called this the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious that allows access to wisdom beyond the reach of rational thought. In the presence of soul alignment, this function activates spontaneously, providing insights and understanding that surprise even as they convince. You find yourself speaking truths you didn't know you knew, sharing dreams and fears and hopes that you have never articulated even to yourself. The conversation becomes not just exchange of information, but mutual revelation, each word a small act of becoming. The call from the depths brings with it a peculiar form of suffering, not the pain of absence or rejection, but the almost unbearable intensity of presence. To be truly seen by another soul is to be loved beyond your capacity to receive, understood, beyond your ability to comprehend, cherished beyond your willingness to believe you deserve such recognition. The ego, accustomed to earning love through performance and maintaining relationships through careful management, finds itself overwhelmed by the unconditional nature of soul recognition. This overwhelm often triggers what Jung called enantiodromia, the psyche's tendency to swing toward the opposite extreme when any position becomes too intense. The very recognition that brings such joy can also bring terror. The same soul that calls to you across the void can suddenly seem like a threat to everything you have built, every identity you have claimed, every plan you have made. The call from the depths becomes simultaneously irresistible attraction and desperate flight, the most natural thing in the world and the most impossible thing to accept. Yet beneath the surface turbulence of conscious resistance, something deeper has already responded to the call. The self, Jung's term for the archetype of wholeness that transcends ego consciousness, has heard its name spoken and has begun to stir. The process of transformation has already begun, set in motion by forces that operate beyond the reach of conscious decision. You may choose to resist the call, to explain it away, to maintain the safety of your familiar patterns, but you cannot unhear what has been heard or unsee what has been seen. The call from the depths is ultimately an invitation to participate in the great work of psychological alchemy, the transformation of the base metal of ordinary existence into the gold of authentic being. When two souls align, they become co-participants in this sacred process, each serving as catalyst for the other's transformation. The bond that forms between them is not just personal connection, but sacred contract, a commitment to mutual becoming that extends far beyond the boundaries of conventional relationship. This is why the call comes from the depths, rather than the surfaces. It emerges from the place where personal psychology meets universal pattern, where individual desire encounters cosmic purpose. It speaks in the voice of the self, calling not just to find love, but to become love, not just to be completed by another, but to discover the completion that was always waiting within. The soul bond is not destination but doorway, not answer but question that opens onto infinite possibility. And so the call sounds across the internal landscape, echoing in chambers of the heart that have been waiting lifetimes to be filled with this precise music. It calls not to the ego with its careful calculations and protective strategies, but to the soul with its infinite capacity for truth, transformation, and transcendence. Those who hear it clearly have only one choice: to answer, to step forward into the mystery, to begin the journey toward an alignment that will change everything they thought they knew about love, about life, about the very nature of human connection. The depths are calling. The question is not whether you will hear, but whether you will have the courage to respond. In the mythology of the soul, there exists no love story that does not first descend into darkness. The shadow, that repository of everything we have, disowned, denied, and cast into the unconscious, stands as the inevitable guardian at the threshold of any authentic connection. Jung understood this with the clarity of one who had walked these depths himself. Before two souls can truly recognize each other in the light, they must first meet in the darkness they both carry. This is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of genuine soul alignment. The popular imagination dreams of love as escape from our darker natures, as a transcendence that lifts us above the messy complexities of our psychological inheritance. But the soul bond demands the opposite. It requires a descent into the very territories we have spent our lives avoiding, a willingness to encounter not just our own shadow, but to witness the shadow of another, without flinching, without judgment, without the desperate need to fix or flee. The shadow dance begins the moment two souls recognize each other across the crowded landscape of ordinary existence. Something in that recognition triggers an ancient alarm system, a primal awareness that this connection will demand more than the comfortable negotiations of surface relationship. The unconscious, with its unerring instinct for self-preservation, begins to mobilize its defenses. What emerges first is not love's tender vulnerability, but the fierce guardianship of everything we have hidden from the world and from ourselves. Jung wrote extensively about the shadow as the unlived life, the roads not taken, the aspects of ourselves that we have deemed unacceptable to our conscious identity. But in the context of soul alignment, the shadow reveals itself as something far more complex and paradoxical. It becomes both the obstacle to intimacy and the very foundation upon which true intimacy can be built. For it is only in owning our darkness that we develop the capacity to hold space for another's struggle with their own hidden territories. The dance begins with projection, that psychological mechanism by which we cast our own unconscious contents onto others, seeing in them what we cannot yet acknowledge in ourselves. When two potential soul partners first encounter each other, they often project not just their unlived potential, but their disowned shadow material. He sees in her the wildness he has repressed. She sees in him the rage she has never allowed herself to feel. These projections create an initial fascination that is both magnetic and terrifying, drawing them together while simultaneously activating every defense mechanism they have developed. But here is where the soul bond differs from ordinary attraction. Instead of using these projections as weapons or excuses for retreat, conscious partners begin to recognize them as invitations. The shadow material that surfaces in early encounters becomes a map of the inner territories that long for integration. When she triggers his fear of abandonment, he does not blame her for being unreliable. He begins to explore the wound that creates such desperate need for security. When he activates her terror of being consumed, she does not label him as controlling. She descends into the places where she lost her own sense of autonomous selfhood. This process requires what Jung called holding the tension of the opposites, the willingness to contain paradox without rushing toward resolution. The shadow dance is fundamentally about learning to hold space for contradiction, to love someone precisely because of their complexity rather than despite it. It means seeing the anger in your beloved and recognizing it as the flip side of their capacity for passion. It means witnessing their fear and understanding it as the shadow of their courage. It means encountering their darkness and knowing it as the necessary counterpart to their light. The ancient alchemists understood this principle. in their laboratories of transformation. The nigredo, the blackening that must precede any authentic change, was not seen as failure, but as necessary stage in the great work. The shadow dance performs a similar function in the alchemy of relationship. It breaks down the artificial divisions between acceptable and unacceptable, between the parts of ourselves we can love and the parts we must hide. In the crucible of mutual shadow work, both partners begin to discover that they are not divided beings, but unified wholes, complete with darkness and light inextricably woven together. But this discovery does not come easily. The ego, accustomed to maintaining its image of goodness and acceptability, resists the shadow's emergence with everything it has. When your shadow begins to surface in the presence of another, every alarm bell of social conditioning begins to sound. You find yourself saying things you never thought you would say, feeling emotions you have spent years controlling, revealing aspects of your nature that you have carefully hidden from the world. The temptation is to retreat, to blame the other for bringing out your worst, to convince yourself that this intensity is unhealthy and should be avoided. The shadow dance requires a fundamental shift in how we understand emotional intensity. Instead of seeing the activation of shadow material as a sign of incompatibility, conscious partners learn to recognize it as evidence of the relationship's power to catalyze transformation. The very qualities that trigger our defensive responses are often pointing toward the aspects of ourselves that most need integration. The person who activates your jealousy may be calling you to examine your relationship with your own worth. The one who triggers your need for control may be inviting you to explore your fear of chaos and unpredictability. Jung observed that we are most critical of the qualities in others that we cannot accept in ourselves. The shadow dance reverses this dynamic, transforming criticism into curiosity. When you find yourself judging your partner's defensiveness, you begin to ask where your own defenses are causing suffering. When you react with alarm to their selfishness, you explore the ways your own suppressed needs are crying out for attention. The mirror becomes not a weapon, but a gift, showing you exactly what needs your conscious attention and integration. This mutual witnessing requires extraordinary courage. It means being willing to be seen in your full humanity, not just your polished public self, but the messy, complicated, sometimes ugly reality of your complete psychological inheritance. It means offering the same radical acceptance to another, seeing their shadow not as evidence of their unworthiness, but as proof of their full humanity. In a culture that demands perfection and punishes vulnerability, this level of authentic seeing is a revolutionary act. The shadow dance also reveals the difference between intimacy and fusion. In fusion, partners attempt to merge by eliminating anything that might create distance or difference between them. Shadow material becomes threat to this artificial unity and must be suppressed or projected away. But in true intimacy, differences are not obstacles to overcome, but bridges to be built. The shadow becomes the very ground upon which authentic connection can be established, because it is only in owning our darkness that we can offer our light without pretense. There is an ancient knowing in the shadow dance, a recognition that spans millennia of human experience. In the sacred marriage ceremonies of various traditions, the bride and groom would often be required to confess their sins or acknowledge their shadows before they could be united. This was not punishment, but preparation, an acknowledgement that true union requires the integration of all aspects of the self, light and dark alike. The modern soul bond performs a similar function, creating a container within which both partners can safely explore the fullness of their psychological inheritance. The dance reaches its crescendo when both partners simultaneously recognize that their shadows are not identical but complementary. Where one carries repressed anger, the other may carry suppressed grief. Where one has disowned their power, the other may have rejected their vulnerability. In The Alchemy of Conscious Relationship, these complementary shadows begin to dance together, each partner offering the other access to the disowned aspects of their own psyche. The shadow becomes not a barrier to love, but a bridge to wholeness. Jung wrote about the necessity of befriending the shadow, developing a conscious relationship with our own darkness that transforms it from enemy to ally. In the context of soul alignment, this befriending becomes a mutual process. Partners learn to hold space, not just for their own shadow integration, but for their beloved's journey into wholeness. They become witnesses to each other's struggle with the rejected aspects of the self, offering neither judgment nor premature comfort, but the rare gift of unconditional presence. This witnessing transforms the shadow from source of shame into source of power. When someone can see your anger and not flee, your fear and not judge, your darkness and not withdraw their love, something profound shifts in your relationship with yourself. The internal critic that has spent years condemning these aspects of your nature begins to quiet. The desperate energy that has gone into hiding your shadow can be redirected toward the work of integration and healing. The shadow dance ultimately reveals that what we have been calling darkness is often simply unlived life, aspects of ourselves that have been pushed underground, not because they are evil, but because they have been deemed unacceptable by family, culture, or circumstance. In the container of conscious relationship, these buried aspects can finally be brought to light, examined, and integrated into a fuller sense of self. The shadow stops being the enemy of love and becomes its greatest teacher, showing us that true intimacy is not possible without radical honesty about the full spectrum of human experience. And so the dance continues, this ancient choreography of revelation and acceptance, of seeing and being seen in the full complexity of human nature. It is a dance that requires patience, courage, and a deep faith in the transformative power of love that does not look away from darkness but sees it as the necessary counterpart to light. In learning to love another's shadow, we learn to love our own. In accepting another's completeness, we discover our own wholeness. The shadow dance becomes not an obstacle to overcome, but a sacred ritual of mutual becoming, a pathway to the kind of love that transforms not by eliminating our humanity, but by embracing it fully. The persona is perhaps the most exquisite prison we ever construct. Layer by layer, year by year, we build these elaborate masks, not out of deception, but out of a deep need to belong, to be acceptable, to find our place in the complex choreography of human society. Jung understood the persona as both necessity and trap, necessary for functioning in the world, yet potentially catastrophic if we mistake it for our true identity. When two souls begin to recognize each other across the landscape of authentic connection, these carefully crafted masks must inevitably fall away, and the falling is both terror and liberation in equal measure. The persona serves us well in the marketplace of ordinary relationships. It allows us to navigate social situations with grace, to present ourselves in ways that invite acceptance, to protect our tender vulnerabilities from the casual cruelties of an unconscious world. We learn early which aspects of ourselves are welcomed and which must be hidden. The angry child learns to smile, the sensitive boy learns to appear tough, the wild girl learns to be demure. These adaptations are not failures of authenticity, but survival strategies, evolutionary responses to the demands of belonging. But the soul bond requires something that the persona cannot provide: the raw material of authentic selfhood. When two souls begin to align, the masks that have served so well in other contexts become obstacles to the very connection they seek. The persona, designed to create safety through acceptability, suddenly stands between you and the one person who might love you not for your performance, but for your essence. The very strategies that have protected you from rejection now threaten to prevent the recognition you have been seeking your entire life. The dismantling of the persona rarely happens by choice. It is forced upon us by the intensity of soul recognition, by the impossible demands of authentic connection, by the way love refuses to be satisfied with anything less than truth. You find yourself in the presence of someone who sees through your carefully constructed presentations, who responds not to your polished public self, but to the authentic being struggling to emerge from beneath layers of social conditioning. The persona begins to crack under the pressure of being truly seen. This cracking often begins with small inconsistencies, moments when your authentic reactions break through the smooth surface of your social mask. Perhaps you laugh too loudly at something that strikes your genuine sense of humor, or you find yourself speaking with passionate intensity about something that matters to you deeply. The persona, accustomed to moderating such expressions, momentarily fails in its regulatory function. You glimpse yourself as you truly are, unfiltered and unmediated, and the sight is both thrilling and terrifying. Jung observed that the persona often becomes so convincing that we forget it is a mask at all. We begin to identify completely with our social role, our professional identity, our carefully curated image. The successful businessman forgets that beneath the suit lies a dreamer. The devoted mother loses touch with the wild woman who once danced under stars. The intellectual suppresses the child who still believes in magic. The persona becomes not just our presentation to the world, but our understanding of who we are. This is the tragedy of modern life, not that we wear masks, but that we forget we are wearing them. The soul bond shatters this forgetting with the force of revelation. In the presence of authentic recognition, the persona reveals itself as the elaborate construction it has always been. The mask that seemed so solid, so natural, so much a part of your identity, suddenly feels foreign and constraining. You find yourself choking on words that once flowed easily, struggling to maintain presentations that once felt effortless. The person who has learned to be charming discovers their charm feels hollow. The one who has mastered being helpful finds their helpfulness feels compulsive rather than genuine. This revelation brings with it a profound identity crisis. If you are not the persona you have spent decades perfecting, then who are you? The question echoes through the chambers of consciousness, like a bell struck in an empty cathedral. The ego, so long identified with its social mask, experiences this unmasking as a kind of death. And in a very real sense it is. The death of the false self, the constructed identity, the carefully managed image that has served as your ambassador to the world. But in the mythology of the soul, every death is also a birth. As the persona crumbles, something else begins to emerge. Not the unformed chaos the ego feared, but the authentic self that has been waiting patiently beneath the mask. This emergence is not violent but gradual, like a butterfly working its way out of a chrysalis. The authentic self does not burst forth fully formed, but unfolds slowly, tentatively, testing its wings in the rare atmosphere of unconditional acceptance. The person who witnesses this unfolding, your soul's counterpart in this dance of mutual becoming, plays a crucial role in the process. They become midwife to your authentic birth, holding space not just for who you have been, but for who you are becoming. Their presence provides the safety necessary for such profound vulnerability. In their eyes, you see reflected not the polished image you have worked so hard to maintain, but the raw, unfinished, gloriously imperfect reality of your essential being. This witnessing is perhaps the most profound gift one soul can offer. Another In a world that rewards performance and punishes authenticity, to be seen in your unguarded truth is to experience a form of love that most people never encounter. It is love that says, "I see you fumbling with your words, struggling with your fears, revealing your awkwardness and uncertainty, and I love you not despite these things, but because of them. I love you because you are real." The falling away of the persona often happens in stages, like the molting of a serpent. First, the outer layers of social nicety begin to slip. You find yourself speaking more directly, laughing more freely, expressing opinions you have always held, but never dared to voice. The polite deferrals and diplomatic evasions that have smoothed your interactions with others begin to feel dishonest in the presence of soul-level connection. Why pretend to agree when you disagree? Why smile when you feel sad? Why moderate your enthusiasm when something fills you with joy? As the outer layers fall away, deeper aspects of the persona begin to reveal themselves. The roles you have played, the good daughter, the responsible son, the selfless caregiver, the strong protector, begin to show their seams. You realize these roles, while containing elements of truth, have also been prisons of expectation. The good daughter discovers her rebellious streak. The responsible son finds his playful spirit. The selfless caregiver encounters her own needs. The strong protector admits his vulnerability. These discoveries are not betrayals of your true nature, but revelations of your fuller truth. The process is not without its dangers. The persona, however constraining, has provided structure and identity. Without its familiar boundaries, there can be a period of intense confusion and disorientation. Who are you, if not the roles you have played? What is your value, if not the functions you have performed? The ego, stripped of its comfortable identifications, may panic at the apparent loss of self. This is the dark night of the soul that mystics have written about for centuries, the terrifying freedom that comes when all external definitions fall away. But this disorientation is necessary passage through the birth canal of authentic being. The confusion signals not the loss of self, but the discovery of a self that is larger, more complex, and more beautiful than the narrow definitions of the persona allowed. You are more than your role, more than your function, more than your carefully maintained image. You are a universe of possibility, a constellation of contradictions, a mystery even to yourself. In the alchemical tradition, this phase of the work was called the solutio, the dissolution that must precede any genuine transformation. The solid forms of the old identity must be broken down into their constituent elements before they can be recombined into something new and more authentic. The soul bond provides the perfect crucible for this dissolution, offering both the heat necessary for transformation and the container strong enough to hold the process safely. The other soul in this dance of mutual unmasking becomes both witness and participant in the alchemical work. They too must allow their own persona to dissolve, must risk their own carefully constructed identity in service of authentic connection. This mutual vulnerability creates a field of extraordinary intimacy, not the false intimacy of shared secrets or private information, but the true intimacy of mutual recognition at the deepest levels of being. As the personas fall away, what emerges is not the chaos the ego feared, but a kind of order that is more natural, more sustainable, and more beautiful than anything the conscious mind could have constructed. The authentic self has its own intelligence, its own knowing, its own way of being in the world that is simultaneously more spontaneous and more trustworthy than the calculated responses of the persona. Free from the exhausting work of image management, energy becomes available for more essential tasks: loving, creating, growing, becoming. The naked truth of being, unadorned by social masks, unprotected by carefully constructed presentations, reveals itself as more attractive, not less, than the polished performance of the persona. There is something irresistibly beautiful about authenticity, something that draws the soul like a magnet. In the presence of someone who has dropped their masks, we feel permission to drop our own. The mutual disarmament creates a space of rare safety where both souls can finally rest from the exhausting work of pretense. This is where the alchemical transformation truly begins, not in the meeting of two personas, but in the encounter between two authentic beings willing to be seen in their unguarded truth. The lead of social conditioning begins to transform into the gold of genuine connection. The artificial constructions of the ego give way to the natural architecture of the soul. What emerges is not just relationship, but a new way of being, a demonstration that love can survive, indeed, can only truly flourish, in the harsh light of complete honesty. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, requires the courage to differentiate between persona and authentic self. The soul bond accelerates this process exponentially, creating conditions where the mask becomes not just unnecessary, but impossible to maintain. In choosing love over safety, authenticity over acceptance, truth over comfort, two souls create, together, what neither could achieve alone, a sanctuary where the full spectrum of human being can be expressed, witnessed, and celebrated. The masquerade is ending. The masks are falling away like autumn leaves, revealing the eternal spring of authentic being that has been waiting beneath the surface all along. In this revelation, the soul bond finds its true beginning, not in the meeting of two perfectly presented selves, but in the recognition of two beautifully imperfect beings, willing to love each other not despite their humanity, but because of it. In the deepest chambers of the psyche, where consciousness meets the vast ocean of the unconscious, there dwells a mysterious figure, a contrasexual presence that Jung called the anima in man and the animus in woman. This inner other is not merely psychological concept, but living reality, a bridge between the known and unknown aspects of the self, carrying within its archetypal form the seeds of completion that we project outward in our search for love. When two souls align in recognition of their deepest truth, they encounter not just each other, but these inner figures made manifest, dancing in the space between them like ancient gods awakening from eternal slumber. The anima and animus are perhaps Jung's most profound discoveries, revealing that within every individual psyche lies a compensatory principle that carries the unlived aspects of our gendered existence. The man who has developed his rational, assertive, outward-directed masculine consciousness finds within his unconscious the anima, the feminine principle that carries his capacity for feeling, intuition, receptivity, and connection to the mystical dimensions of existence. The woman who has cultivated her receptive, nurturing, inward-turning feminine consciousness discovers within her depths the animus, the masculine principle that holds her power of discrimination, action, spiritual aspiration, and connection to meaning and purpose. These figures are not mere psychological abstractions, but autonomous complexes with their own intelligence, their own agenda, their own way of moving through the world. They appear in dreams as lovers, guides, and challengers. They emerge in fantasies as the ideal partner, the perfect complement to our conscious limitations. They manifest in projection as the qualities we seek in others, the man searching for the woman who embodies his unlived feminine depths, the woman drawn to the man who carries her unexpressed masculine potential. The tragedy of ordinary relationships is that we mistake these projections for the actual other, loving them not for who they are, but for how they carry our own unconscious contents. But in the soul bond, something radically different occurs. The anima and animus reveal themselves not as projections to be maintained, but as inner treasures to be reclaimed. When two souls align in authentic recognition, they trigger each other's encounter with these inner figures, catalyzing a process of integration that transforms not just the relationship, but the very structure of consciousness itself. The beloved becomes not the container for your unlived life, but the catalyst for claiming it as your own. The anima in man carries the feminine face of the divine, the receptive, intuitive, feeling-toned aspect of existence that patriarchal conditioning has taught him to devalue or project onto women. She appears in his dreams as the wise woman, the seductive temptress, the nurturing mother, the mysterious stranger who holds keys to chambers of his soul he never knew existed. In waking life, she manifests as his capacity for deep feeling, his connection to beauty and meaning, his ability to receive rather than always give, to be rather than always do. She is his portal to the unconscious, his bridge to the realm of symbol and metaphor, his connection to the cyclical rhythms of natural existence. When a man encounters a woman who is aligned with her own feminine essence, not performing femininity but embodying it, his anima stirs to life. He recognizes in her not just an external other, but a reflection of his own unlived feminine depths. She becomes a mirror in which he can see his own capacity for receptivity, intuition, and emotional depth. But the awakened anima is not content to remain in projection. She demands integration, recognition, a place at the table of conscious awareness. The man must learn to carry his own feminine principle, to develop his feeling function, to honor the receptive and intuitive aspects of his nature. The animus in woman carries the masculine face of the divine, the discriminating, focusing, meaning-making aspect of existence that has been suppressed in favor of relational harmony and emotional accommodation. He appears in her dreams as the wise king, the spiritual teacher, the protective warrior, the passionate lover who calls her to her own power and purpose. In waking life, he manifests as her capacity for clear thinking, decisive action, spiritual aspiration and connection to her own authority. He is her portal to meaning, her bridge to the realm of ideas and principles, her connection to the linear drive toward achievement and transcendence. When a woman encounters a man who embodies conscious masculinity, not dominating but truly strong, not aggressive but genuinely powerful, her animus awakens from its slumber. She sees reflected in him her own capacity for strength, clarity, and purposeful action. But like the anima, the awakened animus refuses to remain in projection. He demands that she claim her own masculine principle, develop her thinking function, honor her own need for meaning and achievement, step into her own authority and power. This awakening of the contrasexual principle creates a profound paradox at the heart of the soul bond. Even as the partners are drawn together by the recognition of their inner opposites reflected in each other, they are simultaneously called to integrate these qualities within themselves. The relationship becomes not a fusion of two incomplete wholes, but a dance between two increasingly whole beings, each carrying within themselves the full spectrum of human potential, masculine and feminine principles in dynamic balance. Jung understood that the goal of individuation is not to eliminate the contrasexual principle, but to develop a conscious relationship with it. The man who integrates his anima does not become feminine, but becomes more fully masculine, his strength tempered by sensitivity, his logic balanced by intuition, his drive toward achievement complemented by capacity for relationship. The woman who integrates her animus does not become masculine, but becomes more fully feminine. Her receptivity empowered by clear boundaries, her intuition sharpened by discriminating wisdom, her nurturing capacity grounded in her own sense of purpose and meaning. In the early stages of soul recognition, these archetypal figures often appear in their most primitive forms. The anima may manifest as the witch or the siren, seductive and dangerous, pulling the man away from his rational control into the chaotic realm of emotion and instinct. The animus may appear as the tyrant or the cold critic, driving the woman toward rigid thinking and harsh judgment, cutting her off from her feeling nature. These negative manifestations are not pathology, but natural stages in the developmental process, showing where integration is needed and what aspects of the contrasexual principle are still unconscious and therefore potentially destructive. The soul bond provides the perfect container for this developmental process. Each partner becomes witness to the other's struggle with their inner opposite, offering neither judgment nor premature rescue, but compassionate presence as the integration unfolds. When his anima emerges in her primitive form as moodiness or emotional manipulation, she does not take it personally, but recognizes it as his psyche's attempt to balance his over-identification with rationality. When her animus appears as critical harshness or rigid thinking, he sees it not as attack, but as her unconscious reaching toward her own power and clarity. As the integration deepens, the anima and animus begin to reveal their more developed forms. The anima transforms from temptress to muse, from chaos to creative inspiration, from emotional manipulation to genuine feeling wisdom. She becomes the man's connection to beauty, meaning, and the sacred dimensions of existence. She teaches him to trust his intuition, to value relationship, to find strength in vulnerability, to receive as well as give. Through her, he discovers that true masculinity includes, rather than excludes, the feminine, that strength is enhanced rather than diminished by sensitivity. The animus evolves from tyrant to wise king, from harsh critic to discriminating guide, from rigid control to flexible strength. He becomes the woman's connection to her own authority, her bridge to meaning and purpose, her capacity for clear action in the world. He teaches her to trust her own thinking, to claim her own power, to set boundaries that honor rather than betray her feminine nature, to give direction to her receptive capacities. Through him, she discovers that true femininity includes rather than excludes the masculine, that receptivity is empowered rather than weakened by clear intention. This integration creates a profound shift in how the partners relate to each other. No longer seeking completion through the other, they can love from wholeness rather than need. The man who has integrated his anima no longer requires his partner to carry all the feeling, intuition, and receptivity in the relationship. He can offer his own emotional intelligence, his own intuitive wisdom, his own capacity for nurturing and care. The woman who has integrated her animus no longer needs her partner to provide all the strength, direction, and meaning in their connection. She can contribute her own clarity, her own purposefulness, her own spiritual aspiration and drive. The dance between integrated anima and animus creates a relationship dynamic that is both stable and alive, grounded and transcendent. Each partner carries the full spectrum of human potential while maintaining their essential gender identity. The masculine and feminine principles dance between them and within them, creating a complex harmony that reflects the deeper patterns of existence itself. They become living examples of the sacred marriage, the hieros gamos that alchemists and mystics have sought throughout history, not the fusion of opposites, but their dynamic integration. Jung wrote extensively about the transcendent function, the bridge between conscious and unconscious that allows access to wisdom beyond rational understanding. In the soul bond between individuated partners, the integrated anima and animus serve as living expressions of this transcendent function. They become portals through which the partners can access not just their own unconscious contents, but the collective wisdom of the masculine and feminine principles themselves. Their relationship becomes a sanctuary where these archetypal forces can manifest in their most evolved forms. The recognition of the anima and animus in the soul bond also connects the partners to the mythic dimensions of their love. They are no longer just two individuals attracted to each other, but participants in the eternal dance of divine masculine and feminine that has played out in countless myths and spiritual traditions. They are Shiva and Shakti, the dynamic tension between consciousness and energy. They are the alchemical king and queen, ruling together over the transformed landscape of integrated personality. They are the divine lovers, whose union creates worlds, whose separation enables differentiation, whose reunion brings about the birth of new consciousness. This mythic dimension elevates the relationship beyond personal satisfaction to cosmic significance. The partners understand that their love serves not just their own growth, but the evolution of consciousness itself. By integrating their contrasexual principles, by learning to love from wholeness rather than need, by creating a relationship that honors both unity and differentiation, they participate in the healing of the fundamental split between masculine and feminine that has wounded human consciousness for millennia. The soul bond thus becomes a laboratory for the development of integrated human beings, individuals who carry within themselves the full spectrum of human potential while remaining authentically themselves. The anima and animus, no longer projected onto others or repressed within the unconscious, become conscious allies in the work of individuation. They serve as guides, teachers, and sources of creative inspiration, helping their bearers navigate the complex terrain of authentic relationship with wisdom, compassion, and deep understanding of the archetypal forces that shape human experience. In this integration, the soul bond achieves its highest expression, not as escape from the complexities of human nature, but as full embodiment of its potential. The partners do not complete each other in the sentimental sense, but complement each other in the truest sense, each bringing their own wholeness to a dance that creates something greater than the sum of its parts. They become bridges between heaven and earth, between conscious and unconscious, between the individual and the universal, demonstrating through their love that the deepest human longing is not for another person, but for the integration of all that we are and all that we might become. In the deepest chambers of the human heart, where silence meets mystery and the soul begins its most sacred work, there exists a laboratory unlike any other. Here, in this hidden sanctuary of transformation, two beings who have walked the labyrinthine paths of their own becoming now stand at the threshold of the great work, the opus contra naturam, the work against nature, that paradoxically fulfills nature's deepest intention. This is not the marriage of convenience that the world celebrates, nor the sentimental union of hearts that flutter like butterflies in spring sunshine. This is the conjunctio, the alchemical marriage of opposites, where two souls who have descended into their own depths and emerged transformed now enter the crucible of sacred union. They come not as incomplete halves seeking completion, but as whole beings ready to be dissolved and reformed in the fires of a love that burns away everything that is not essential. The alchemical marriage begins in dissolution, the nigredo, the blackening, where all that seemed solid in the individual self must be surrendered to the greater work. Like the ancient alchemists who watched base metals dissolve in their retorts, these souls witness the dissolution of their carefully constructed identities, their protective personas, their illusions of separateness. What they thought they knew about themselves, about love, about the very nature of union, must be poured into the alembic of transformation and allowed to decompose. In this first stage, there is terror and wonder intermingled. The ego, that faithful servant of survival, recoils from the dissolution. It has worked so hard to maintain its boundaries, to know where self ends and other begins, to preserve the familiar contours of identity. But the call of the deeper self is stronger than the ego's resistance. Something in the very marrow of being recognizes that this dissolution is not destruction but preparation, the necessary breaking down that precedes the building up of something entirely new. The laboratory of the heart becomes a vessel of tremendous heat. Old patterns of relating, inherited from parents and ancestors, from culture and conditioning, begin to liquefy under the intensity of authentic meeting. The masks that have served so well in the outer world, the persona of the competent lover, the successful partner, the one who has love figured out, these dissolve like sugar in water, leaving only the raw essence of being, and in this dissolution something miraculous begins to occur. The boundaries that seemed so solid, so necessary, reveal themselves to be more fluid than ever imagined. The self that thought it knew its own shape discovers that it is capable of expansion beyond all previous conception. The heart that believed it had fixed limits finds itself opening into territories of feeling and perception that were previously unimaginable. This is the paradox of the alchemical marriage. In losing the smaller self, the greater self is born. In surrendering the illusion of separation, true intimacy becomes possible. The souls involved discover that they are participating in something far larger than their personal desires or fears. They are enacting an archetypal process that has been repeating itself throughout human history, the eternal return of the sacred marriage that creates worlds. The second stage of the great work is purification, the albedo, the whitening, where the dissolved elements are cleansed of their impurities. This is the work of discernment, of learning, to distinguish between the gold and the dross in the alchemical vessel of relationship. The souls begin to recognize which aspects of their union serve the greater work and which are merely the residue of old patterns, unconscious projections, and undigested experiences. In this phase, the clarity that emerges is sometimes painful. The projections that each soul has cast upon the other, the anima and animus, the inner feminine and masculine that have been seeking external embodiment, these must be withdrawn and owned. The beloved is no longer required to carry the unlived aspects of the self. The responsibility for wholeness returns to where it belongs, within the individual soul. This purification process requires tremendous courage and honesty. It means acknowledging the ways in which the other has been expected to fill the empty places in the self, to heal the wounds of childhood, to provide the security or passion or understanding that only the relationship with one's own depths can ultimately supply. It means recognizing that the very qualities that drew the souls together, the complementary opposites that seem to promise completion, must be developed within each individual rather than sought in the other. Yet this is not a process of disillusionment, but of deeper enchantment. As the projections are withdrawn, the beloved is revealed in their true nature, not as a screen for fantasies or a solution to problems, but as a fellow traveler on the path of becoming a unique and irreplaceable expression of the mystery of being. The love that emerges from this purification is not less than what came before, but infinitely more. Love freed from the burden of unrealistic expectations. Love that honors the otherness of the other while celebrating the unity that transcends difference. The purified relationship becomes a mirror in which each soul can see its own reflection with unprecedented clarity. The patterns that were invisible in isolation become apparent in the dynamics of intimate exchange. The shadow elements that were hidden in the depths of the unconscious are called forth by the challenges and opportunities of deep connection. The relationship becomes a laboratory for the ongoing work of individuation, a space where the soul can continue its lifelong journey toward wholeness. In this stage, the souls learn the delicate art of being both separate and connected, individual and united. They discover that true intimacy is not the merging of boundaries, but the meeting of two complete beings who maintain their integrity while opening to profound exchange. They learn to dance the eternal dance of coming together and moving apart, of union and separation, that mirrors the cosmic rhythm of expansion and contraction, of breathing in and breathing out. The third stage of the alchemical marriage is the emergence of the new, the rubedo, the reddening, where the purified elements are fused into something that transcends the sum of its parts. This is the birth of the transcendent function, the creative tension between opposites that generates new possibilities. The relationship becomes a generative force, a source of energy and inspiration that flows not only between the partners, but out into the world. In this phase, the souls discover that their union has created something that neither could have achieved alone. They have become co-creators in the ongoing work of conscious evolution, participants in the universe's drive toward greater complexity and consciousness. Their love becomes a force of transformation that extends far beyond their personal happiness or fulfillment. The alchemical marriage reveals itself to be simultaneously the most personal and the most universal of experiences. It is personal because it involves the most intimate aspects of the self, the deepest fears and desires, the most carefully guarded secrets, the most tender vulnerabilities. It is universal because it recapitulates the cosmic process of creation itself, the marriage of opposites that generates all life and consciousness. The souls in alchemical union become living symbols of the conjunctio that is always occurring. At the deepest levels of reality, they embody the marriage of heaven and earth, spirit and matter, consciousness and unconscious. That is the fundamental creative principle of the universe. Their relationship becomes a microcosm of the macrocosm, a reflection of the divine marriage that is eternally generating the world. In this realization, the partners begin to understand that their love is not merely their own, but belongs to the great work of conscious evolution. They are servants of something larger than themselves, caretakers of a sacred process that has been unfolding since the beginning of time. Their relationship becomes a vessel for the divine, a place where the transcendent can manifest in the realm of the personal and intimate. The alchemical marriage transforms not only the souls involved, but the entire field of relationship. It creates ripples that extend through families, communities, and cultures. It demonstrates that love is not just a feeling or an emotion, but a force of transformation, a power that can literally change the structure of reality. It shows that the personal is indeed political, that the work of conscious relationship is a contribution to the healing of the world. As the great work continues, the souls discover that the alchemical marriage is not a destination, but a way of being. It is an ongoing process of dissolution, purification, and regeneration that continues throughout the life of the relationship. Each day brings new opportunities for the work, new challenges that invite deeper levels of surrender and transformation. The laboratory of the heart never closes. The retorts and alembics of transformation are always bubbling with new possibilities. The souls who have entered into this sacred work find themselves in a lifelong apprenticeship to the mystery of love, students of the great teacher that is the divine marriage of opposites. In the end, the alchemical marriage reveals the deepest truth of all intimate relationships, that love is not something we have but something we do, not a possession but a practice, not a feeling but a way of being. It is the work of a lifetime, the great work that transforms base metal into gold, that turns the lead of unconscious relationship into the gold of conscious union. The souls who undertake this work discover that they have become alchemists of the heart, practitioners of the sacred art of transformation. They have learned to work with the prima materia of human relationship, the raw, unprocessed emotions and reactions, the inherited patterns and unconscious projections, and to transform them through the application of conscious attention and loving intention. Their relationship becomes a living mandala, a sacred circle that contains and transforms all that enters it. Within this circle, the work of individuation continues, but now it is supported and accelerated by the presence of another who is equally committed to the path of becoming. The souls become mirrors and teachers for each other, challenging and supporting each other's growth in ways that neither could achieve alone. The alchemical marriage is thus revealed as one of the most powerful contexts for the work of psychological and spiritual development. It provides a constant feedback loop for the unconscious, a relationship that reflects back our blind spots and unlived potentials with loving but uncompromising clarity. It offers a laboratory for the practice of all the virtues, patience, compassion, forgiveness, courage, honesty that are necessary for the journey toward wholeness. In this sacred work, the souls discover that they are not just healing their own wounds, but participating in the healing of the collective human heart. Every moment of conscious relationship, every choice to love rather than to defend, every act of forgiveness and understanding contributes to the evolution of love itself. The alchemical marriage becomes a gift to the world, a demonstration of what is possible when human beings commit themselves to the great work of conscious evolution. The laboratory of the heart continues its work, day by day, year by year, transforming the base metal of unconscious relationship into the gold of conscious union. And in this transformation, the souls discover that they have become not just lovers, but co-creators, not just partners, but fellow alchemists in the great work of making love manifest in the world. In the shimmering haze of intimacy, there lies a crucible, a place where love's light refracts into countless shadows, revealing the hidden contours of the soul. This crucible is the space of projection, where we encounter not the beloved as they truly are, but as the screen upon which our unspoken fears and unlived dreams are cast. It is here, in the alchemy of relationship, that we meet the unhealed fragments of ourselves, cloaked in the guise of the other. Projection is the ancient spell we weave unknowingly, binding our perception to the image of our own inner world. Like Narcissus gazing into the still waters, we see not the beloved, but a reflection of our own longings, wounds, and forgotten potential. The other becomes both a muse and a mirror, offering glimpses of what we fear and desire, what we have denied and yearn to embrace. This act of projection is not a failing but a natural function of the psyche, a bridge between the conscious self and the vast, uncharted realms of the unconscious. Carl Jung understood this mechanism deeply, recognizing projection as both a barrier to true connection and a path to profound self-discovery. In the beloved's face, we glimpse our shadow, the disowned aspects of ourselves we are unwilling or unable to confront directly. Their actions provoke us, their silence wounds us, their love ignites a fire that consumes our illusions and demands our transformation. In the early stages of relationship, projections are seductive. They cast a golden glow over the beloved, endowing them with qualities we wish to possess or deny in ourselves. We see their courage and forget our fear, their beauty and ignore our inadequacy, their flaws and deny our own imperfections. In this enchanted state, the beloved becomes larger than life, a vessel for our highest hopes and our deepest insecurities. Yet the crucible of projection is not meant to preserve illusions. It is a fire that purifies, a relentless force that dissolves the false idols we create. The beloved, through their mere existence, challenges the idealized image we have placed upon them. Their humanity breaks through the mask, revealing imperfections that shatter our fantasies. It is here, in the disillusionment, that the true work begins. For conscious partners, the rupture of projection is not an ending, but a beginning, a sacred invitation to see each other and themselves with clarity and compassion. When projections fall away, what remains is the raw, unvarnished truth of two souls standing before each other, stripped of pretense. The other is no longer a mirror of perfection or a scapegoat for inadequacy, but a living, breathing being with their own wounds, desires, and struggles. In this vulnerable space, the relationship transforms. The beloved, once a prison of expectations, becomes a catalyst for individuation. Through the painful process of confronting our projections, we reclaim the parts of ourselves we had disowned. The courage we admired in the other becomes our own. The flaws we criticized become opportunities for self-forgiveness. The beloved's imperfections become a reminder of our shared humanity. Their strengths a call to awaken our potential. Projection, when met with consciousness, becomes a crucible for wholeness. It burns away the false divisions between self and other, dissolving the illusion of separation. What remains is a profound sense of interconnectedness, a recognition that the beloved is both a reflection of our inner world and a sovereign soul. In their own right, in their eyes, we see not only the shadow, but also the light, the infinite potential for growth and transformation. This process is not easy. It requires humility to admit our projections, courage to confront the shadows they reveal, and patience to navigate the complexity of human connection. It demands that we hold space for our own growth and that of the other, resisting the temptation to cling to illusions or impose expectations. It asks us to honor the sacred dance of individuation, where two souls come together, not to complete each other, but to awaken the completeness that already exists within. In the crucible of projection, love becomes a spiritual practice. It ceases to be a pursuit of fulfillment and becomes a path of awakening, a journey toward deeper self-awareness and authentic connection. The beloved, far from being an object of possession, becomes a teacher, a guide, a fellow traveler on the path of transformation. And so, we step into the fire of conscious relationship, knowing that it will challenge us, stretch us, and reshape us. We embrace the beloved not as a mirror of perfection, but as a partner in the sacred work of becoming whole. We honor the projections that arise, not as truths, but as invitations to deeper understanding. And in this process, we discover that love is not a static state, but a dynamic force, ever evolving, ever expanding, ever calling us toward the vast, mysterious depths of our own being. There is a silence that calls to the soul, a silence deeper than absence, more profound than the mere stilling of sound. It is the solitude of the hermit's return, the space where the tether to the beloved loosens, not in rejection, but in reverence for the sacred work that can only unfold in isolation. This solitude is not barren, it is fertile ground where the seeds of individuation sprout and flourish. To love deeply is to risk forgetting oneself, to merge so intimately with the other that the boundaries of identity blur like watercolors bleeding together. Yet for love to be a vessel of transformation, it must breathe, it must expand and contract, create and release. Herein lies the paradox. The deepest connections are sustained by the willingness to step away, to retreat into the sanctity of one's own being. This is the hermit's return, a deliberate departure from the warmth of togetherness into the cool, unyielding terrain of solitude. It is a journey not of abandonment, but of renewal, a sacred pause that honors the necessity of separation within union. In the embrace of solitude, the soul remembers its own contours, the unique rhythms that define its existence apart from the beloved. For the unconscious clings tightly, weaving webs of fusion that threaten to stifle the individuality of both souls. Without solitude, the relationship becomes a closed loop, a stagnant pond where the waters of growth cease to flow. Fusion masquerades as closeness, but it is a closeness that binds rather than frees, that consumes rather than nourishes. The hermit's retreat disrupts this pattern, breaking the spell of enmeshment and allowing each soul to breathe again. In solitude, the soul encounters its own reflection, not through the mirror of the beloved, but in the still waters of its inner landscape. Here, there are no projections, no external dramas to distract from the quiet truths that lie within. The hermit listens to the whispers of the unconscious, tending the flame of self-awareness that illuminates the path of individuation. This flame is fragile yet vital. It flickers with the winds of uncertainty, yet its light reveals the hidden corners of the psyche, the wounds that ache for healing, the gifts that yearn for expression, the fears that guard the gates of transformation. In solitude, the hermit comes face to face with these truths, discovering not only the shadows that linger, but also the wholeness that has always been. To retreat into solitude is not to turn away from the beloved, but to prepare for their return. It is a practice of holding the tension between closeness and separation, a dynamic dance that sustains the creative energy of the relationship. In this pause, the soul learns to stand alone, not in isolation, but in sovereignty, cultivating the inner strength that makes true togetherness possible. For love is not the merging of two incomplete beings, but the meeting of two whole souls, each bringing their unique essence to the alchemy of connection. The hermit's solitude nourishes this wholeness, allowing each partner to reclaim the aspects of themselves that risk being lost in the intimacy of union. It is a time to rediscover the inner flame that burns independent of the beloved, the light that guides the journey inward. And yet solitude is not without its trials. The soul, accustomed to the warmth of the beloved's presence, may resist the chill of aloneness, mistaking it for abandonment or loss. But this resistance is the crucible in which the hermit's courage is forged. To endure solitude is to embrace the paradox of love, that to come closer, one must first step away. It is to trust that the bond will endure, not through clinging, but through the strength of two independent souls, choosing each other anew. As the hermit emerges from solitude, they return not as they were, but as one transformed, clearer in their essence, steadier in their being. The beloved, too, has journeyed in their own solitude, tending their own flame. When they meet again, it is not as two halves seeking completion, but as two lights illuminating a shared path. Their union, enriched by the breathing space of solitude, becomes a dance of mutual becoming, a dynamic interplay of individuality and connection. In the hermit's return to solitude, the soul discovers the balance that sustains love, the balance between togetherness and aloneness, between merging and individuation. It is a practice, a discipline, and a gift that allows the relationship to evolve, to deepen, to thrive. And so, the hermit walks the path of solitude not as a retreat from love, but as an act of devotion to its highest expression, a union that honors the wholeness of both souls, even as it weaves them together in a sacred dance of becoming. In the great dance of the psyche, there exists a law as ancient as the movement of tides, as predictable as the rhythm of breath, as inevitable as the turning of seasons. It is the law of enantiodromia, the sacred reversal, the divine swing of the pendulum that carries all psychic energy from one pole to its opposite. This is not the cruel whim of fate, but the wisdom of the unconscious, the natural pulsation that prevents stagnation and ensures the continuous flow of life through the vessels of consciousness. For souls who have found each other across the vast reaches of existence, who have recognized in one another the mirror of their own becoming, this principle manifests with particular intensity and purpose. The very depth of their connection creates the conditions for its opposite, periods of distance, withdrawal, and seeming disconnection that can feel like betrayal to those who do not understand the deeper currents at work. When two beings have opened their hearts so completely that boundaries seem to dissolve, when the ecstasy of recognition has lifted them into realms of unity that transcend ordinary experience, the psyche begins its inevitable movement toward the compensating opposite. Like a river that has flooded its banks and must now return to its natural course, the energy that has expanded into merger must contract into individuation. The oneness must give birth to two-ness. The fusion must separate into distinct and autonomous beings. This is not failure. It is fulfillment. It is not the end of love, but love's deepest expression, for true love honors the otherness of the beloved even as it celebrates the unity that transcends separation. The souls who understand enantiodromia learn to dance with this rhythm rather than resist it, to trust the wisdom of withdrawal as much as they cherish the gift of approach. The first movement of this dance often comes as a shock to those unprepared for its appearance. After weeks or months or even years of unprecedented closeness, of feeling finally understood and seen and met at the deepest levels, something begins to shift. The partner who was once so present begins to seem distant. The conversations that flowed like rivers in spring begin to feel forced or shallow. The easy intimacy that felt so natural begins to require effort. The ego mind rushes to create explanations. Something is wrong. We are losing what we had. I must have done something to drive them away. Fear mobilizes its ancient strategies of pursuit and withdrawal, of clinging and pushing, of trying to force the return of what seems to be slipping away. But these strategies, born from ignorance of the deeper rhythms, often serve only to intensify the very dynamic they seek to prevent. The wise soul recognizes these moments as invitations rather than threats, as necessary movements in the larger symphony of relationship rather than discord to be eliminated. They understand that the withdrawal of their partner is not a rejection, but a requirement. The psyche's need to return to center, to reconnect with the individual self that may have become temporarily lost in the bliss of union. For in the depths of authentic connection, there lies a paradox that only the mature soul can embrace. The very completeness of meeting creates a need for incompleteness. The perfection of understanding generates a hunger for mystery. The safety of being fully known awakens a longing for the unknown aspects of oneself. This is not contradiction, but complement, not dysfunction, but the healthy pulsation of psychic life. The movement into distance serves multiple functions in the architecture of conscious relationship. First, it provides space for integration. The experiences of deep connection, the insights and revelations that emerge from authentic meeting, require time and solitude to be properly digested and incorporated into the structure of the self. Like food that must be metabolized in the privacy of cellular process, the gifts of intimacy must be processed in the sanctuary of individual consciousness. Second, the movement toward separation serves the ongoing work of individuation. No matter how profound the connection between two souls, each remains on their own unique journey toward wholeness. The phases of withdrawal provide opportunity for this individual work to continue, for the aspects of self that may have been temporarily overshadowed by the intensity of relationship to reassert their presence and claim their rightful place. In the constellation of identity, Third, the rhythm of distance and closeness prevents the stagnation that can occur when any dynamic becomes too fixed or predictable. Relationship, like all living systems, requires the constant flow of energy to remain vital and creative. The movement between poles ensures that neither fusion nor separation becomes a rigid pattern, that the relationship remains alive and responsive to the changing needs of the souls involved. The challenge for those learning to dance with enantiodromia lies not in the experience of reversal itself, but in their relationship to that experience. The untrained mind interprets the movement away as loss, the shift from closeness to distance as a diminishment of love. But the soul that has learned to read the deeper patterns recognizes these movements as the very expression of love's intelligence, the way that authentic connection protects and preserves itself by honoring the natural rhythms of psychic life. This recognition requires a fundamental shift in perspective, from seeing relationship as a static state to understanding it as a dynamic process, from expecting consistency to appreciating fluidity, from fearing change to trusting the wisdom inherent in transformation. It means learning to love the dance itself rather than trying to freeze it in any particular position. The movement from passion to conflict represents another manifestation of enantiodromia that often challenges souls in deep connection. The very intensity of feeling that draws them together also creates the conditions for its opposite. Periods of friction, disagreement, and apparent discord that can feel devastating to those who have known such harmony. But here, too, lies hidden wisdom. The conflicts that arise between deeply connected souls are rarely about surface issues, but about the fundamental tensions that exist within consciousness itself. The pull between freedom and security, between growth and stability, between individual expression and collective harmony. These tensions cannot be resolved through compromise or avoidance. They must be danced with, held in creative tension, allowed to generate the energy that fuels continued evolution. The aligned souls learn to see their conflicts not as problems to be solved, but as koans to be lived. Not as evidence of incompatibility, but as invitations to deeper understanding. They recognize that the friction between them often represents the friction between different aspects of their own inner nature, that the partner who seems to oppose them may actually be serving as the voice of their own unlived potentials or undeveloped capacities. In this understanding, conflict becomes sacred work rather than unfortunate interruption. It becomes an opportunity for shadow integration, for bringing into consciousness the aspects of self that have been projected onto the other. It becomes a laboratory for practicing the art of holding opposites without choosing sides, of maintaining connection across difference without demanding uniformity. The rhythm of unity and differentiation represents perhaps the most subtle and sophisticated aspect of enantiodromia in soul bonds. This is the movement between the moments when the souls feel like one being expressing itself through two forms, and the moments when they feel like completely separate entities who happen to be sharing space and time. In the unity phase, boundaries become permeable and sometimes seem to disappear entirely. The souls experience a kind of telepathic connection, finishing each other's thoughts, feeling each other's emotions, moving in spontaneous synchrony. This can be deeply fulfilling, but also potentially overwhelming, as the individual self may begin to feel lost in the vastness of shared consciousness. The differentiation phase emerges as a natural response to this overwhelming unity. The souls begin to assert their individual perspectives, to reclaim their unique ways of seeing and being, to re-establish the boundaries that may have become too fluid. This can feel like rejection or abandonment to the ego that has been enjoying the bliss of merger, but it serves the essential function of preserving the individuality that makes relationship possible in the first place. For without two distinct, beings, there can be no relationship, only a kind of unconscious fusion that, while it may feel blissful, ultimately serves neither soul's development toward wholeness. The movement between unity and differentiation ensures that connection occurs between sovereign individuals rather than between fragments seeking completion in each other. Learning to dance with these rhythms requires developing what might be called meta-awareness, the capacity to observe the movements of the psyche without being completely identified with any particular phase. This is the witness consciousness that can appreciate both the beauty of closeness and the necessity of distance, that can value both the harmony of agreement and the creativity of conflict, that can embrace both the bliss of unity and the dignity of differentiation. This meta-awareness develops slowly through repeated experience of the cycles and through the cultivation of trust in the deeper intelligence that governs them. It requires releasing the ego's need for control and predictability, and opening to the mystery of a process that operates according to laws deeper than conscious intention. The souls who learn this dance discover that their relationship becomes a living mandala, a sacred circle that contains and expresses the fundamental polarities of existence. They become dancers in the cosmic ballet of opposites, participants in the eternal play of consciousness that manifests as the endless creativity of the universe. In their willingness to move with rather than against the natural rhythms, they find a freedom and vitality that those who resist enantiodromia never discover. Their relationship becomes a source of constant renewal rather than gradual stagnation, a fountain of creativity rather than a pool of familiarity. They learn that love is not a feeling that can be possessed or maintained through will, but a dynamic process that must be continuously renewed through surrender to its own intelligence. They discover that the deepest intimacy emerges not from the elimination of distance, but from the skillful navigation of both closeness and separation, not from the avoidance of conflict, but from the capacity to let disagreement serve the larger purpose of growth and understanding. In time, they begin to recognize the approaching phases before they fully manifest, like sailors who learn to read the subtle signs of changing weather. They develop the ability to prepare for distance without pushing it away, to welcome closeness without grasping at it, to enter conflict without losing sight of the love that underlies it. This mastery is not achieved through technique, but through trust, not through strategy, but through surrender to the wisdom of the process itself. It is the fruit of years of patient observation, of countless cycles of expansion and contraction, of the slow development of faith in the intelligence that governs the dance of relationship. The souls who achieve this mastery become teachers to others, not through words, but through the quality of their presence, through the evident vitality and creativity of their connection. They demonstrate that it is possible to love without attachment, to connect without losing oneself, to dance with the rhythms of enantiodromia without being overwhelmed by them. Their relationship becomes a work of art, a living sculpture that changes constantly while maintaining its essential form, a symphony that incorporates both harmony and dissonance into a larger pattern of beauty. They have learned the secret that the ancient alchemists knew, that the opus contra naturam, the work against nature, is actually the fulfillment of nature's deepest intention. In their dance with enantiodromia, they embody the very principle that governs all life, the creative tension between opposites that generates the energy for growth, change, and evolution. They become living examples of the truth that Jung discovered in his exploration of the psyche, that wholeness emerges not from the elimination of contradictions, but from their conscious integration, not from the achievement of balance, but from the dynamic dance between polarities. And in this dance, they find not only their own fulfillment, but contribute to the evolution of love itself, adding their unique movements to the eternal choreography of consciousness that is always creating new forms of beauty, new possibilities. For connection, new ways for the one to know itself through the experience of relationship with the other. Beneath the personal tale of love lies a deeper story, ancient and eternal, woven from the threads of myth and archetype. It is a story older than memory, inscribed in the collective soul of humanity. The lovers who find themselves in its embrace do not merely live a singular bond. They step into a vast, unfolding drama, their personal narrative becoming a vessel for timeless truths. Here, in the archetypal foundation, we encounter the eternal patterns that have guided human connection since time immemorial. Love, in its most profound expression, transcends the personal. It becomes a bridge between the individual and the universal, a sacred dance that mirrors the great myths of existence. Consider the tale of Psyche and Eros, where the soul, embodied by Psyche, is called into the labyrinthine journey of union with divine love. It is not a union given freely, but one earned through trials that strip away illusion and demand the full surrender of the ego. Psyche's journey is our journey, through the shadows of doubt, the fires of transformation, and the descent into the unconscious where the seeds of rebirth are planted. To love is to embrace this journey, to accept that the beloved will unveil not only the beauty of the divine, but also the terrors of our own inadequacy and longing. To participate in the myth is to recognize that love is both blessing and ordeal. The divine lovers, whose union animates the cosmos, serve as the blueprint for every human bond. They are the sun and moon, the fire and water, the opposing yet complementary forces that, in their sacred tension, sustain the dance of creation. When two souls align, their love becomes a microcosm of this cosmic interplay, a reflection of the universe's yearning for unity within duality. The sacred marriage, the hieros gamos, reveals the ultimate purpose of such union. The merging of opposites, the reconciliation of masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious, self and other. It is not a literal act, but an alchemical process, a merging that births wholeness. In love, the boundaries dissolve, yet paradoxically, the individuality of each partner is not erased but amplified. Through their connection, they become more fully themselves, as if the mirror of the beloved reveals the contours of the soul more vividly than solitude ever could. To see oneself through the beloved's eyes is to witness both the divine and the shadow, the luminous and the fractured. For love is a mirror that does not lie. It shows us not only the beauty we long to claim, but also the wounds we seek to hide. The archetypal foundation of love insists upon this duality, that to stand in the radiance of union, one must also descend into the depths of disunion. The myths teach us this truth. Psyche must descend into the underworld. Orpheus must turn and lose Eurydice. Inanna must be stripped bare before the gates of the underworld. So too must we, in love, surrender to the process of being unmade and remade. This is the paradox of love. It is both deeply personal and profoundly impersonal. When we love, we are not merely ourselves. We become conduits for the collective human experience of love, loss, and transformation. The lover's story is not theirs alone, but belongs to every soul that has ever yearned, every heart that has ever broken, every spirit that has ever risen from the ashes of despair to find love anew. Through this archetypal lens, the beloved is no longer just a partner, but an initiator, a guide into the mysteries of the self and the cosmos. They are eros, the divine force that awakens desire not for mere possession, but for transcendence. They are Psyche, the soul in its yearning, its vulnerability, its courage to undertake the journey toward the divine. Together, they enact the drama of love's eternal unfolding, their bond a thread in the vast tapestry of human connection. And yet, To live this archetypal story is not to be subsumed by it. The challenge of love is to balance the universality of the myth with the uniqueness of the individual bond. Each love story, while echoing the great patterns, is also singular, carved from the particularities of two lives, two histories, two souls. The myths guide, but do not dictate. They illuminate, but do not confine. The lovers must find their own way, their own rhythm, within the vast symphony of love's archetypal foundation. To recognize the archetypal foundation is to understand that love is not merely an emotion, but a sacred task, a calling to participate in the eternal work of creation and transformation. It is to see that every kiss, every argument, every moment of tenderness and strife is part of a larger story. A story that is both ancient and ever new, both universal and uniquely ours. And so the lovers stand not as isolated figures, but as participants in the great myths of existence. Their bond is a living expression of these timeless themes, a testament to the enduring power of love to unite, to challenge, to heal, and to transform. Through their connection, they are not only joined to each other, but to the collective human experience, their love, a bridge between the personal and the eternal, the individual and the universal, the fleeting and the infinite. To love deeply, in the truest sense, is to step into a crucible, a place where the soul's raw elements meet the alchemical fires of transformation. This is not the soft glow of romance as the world imagines it, nor the fleeting intoxication of passion. It is the profound, often arduous process of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who we truly are. The soul bond, then, is not merely a vessel for comfort or fleeting joy. It is a sacred forge where the dross of the ego is burned away to reveal the gold of authentic selfhood. When two aligned souls meet, they recognize in each other not only a beloved, but a catalyst, a mirror that reflects both the beauty and the brokenness within, the divine spark and the shadowed corners of the psyche. In this bond, the familiar patterns of the ego are challenged. The beloved becomes an unsettling force, shaking the foundations of what we thought we knew about ourselves. This is not the rupture of destruction, but the tremor of growth, the necessary shattering of illusions that no longer serve. Love, in its highest form, does not allow us to remain small. It insists on expansion, on evolution, on the courage to face ourselves fully. Here lies the paradox. To love another deeply is to be called into the depths of our own solitude. For individuation is not a path that can be walked in tandem. It is a solitary pilgrimage into the wilderness of the self. And yet, the presence of the beloved acts as a lantern in this wilderness, illuminating the terrain we must traverse alone. They do not walk the path for us, but their light reveals the next step. This dynamic is not without its struggles. To serve as a catalyst for another's growth is both an honor and a burden. It requires fierce tenderness, a love strong enough to withstand the storms of transformation and tender enough to hold space for the vulnerability it unveils. It demands unwavering commitment, not to the idea of the other, but to their becoming, to the unfolding of their truest self. The process of mutual individuation is a dance of opposites. It requires both proximity and distance, connection and autonomy. Too much fusion, and the fire of transformation is smothered. Too much separation, and the crucible loses its heat. The lovers must navigate this tension with care, honoring the delicate balance that allows both to thrive. This is not an easy journey. The wounds of the past, the defenses of the ego, the fears of abandonment and rejection all rise to the surface in the presence of such an intimate bond. But these obstacles are not barriers to love. They are its work. The beloved does not heal our wounds for us, but holds the space in which we can do so ourselves. They witness our pain without flinching, our growth without envy, our becoming without expectation. The individuation catalyst is not always gentle. It can feel like fire, like flood, like a tearing apart. But within this intensity lies the seed of transformation. Just as the chrysalis must dissolve into chaos before the butterfly can emerge, so too must the lovers allow themselves to be undone. They must trust that the process, though painful, is leading them toward wholeness. And what is wholeness if not the union of all that we are, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, masculine and feminine? The beloved, in their role as catalyst, helps us to integrate these opposites within ourselves. Through their love, we come to see that we are not fragments but a vast, interconnected whole, containing multitudes. This is the gift of the soul bond. It does not complete us, for we are already whole. Instead, it reveals our wholeness to us, reflecting the fullness of our being in a way that we cannot see alone. It challenges us to claim our authentic selfhood, to stand in the truth of who we are, no matter how vulnerable or uncertain that truth may feel. The journey of mutual individuation is not linear. It is cyclical, spiraling ever deeper into the layers of the self. There are moments of clarity and connection, moments of doubt and disconnection, but through it all, the love remains. A steady flame that burns not for possession or control, but for the sheer beauty of witnessing the other's becoming. In the end, the purpose of the soul bond is not to make us happy, but to make us whole. It is a crucible for transformation, a sacred space where two souls can grow into the fullness of their potential. It is a love that does not bind but liberates, a love that does not demand but inspires, a love that does not fix but heals. And so, the lovers stand together, not as halves seeking completion, but as whole beings, each holding the space for the other's unfolding. Their love is not the destination, but the journey, not the answer, but the question, not the end, but the beginning of a lifelong dance of becoming. In their bond, they find not only each other, but themselves, and in themselves, the infinite. There comes a moment in every deep union where the boundary between the personal and the universal begins to dissolve. What once seemed a private endeavor, the tender unfolding of two lives intertwined, suddenly reveals its larger purpose. The love that binds is no longer confined to the intimate world of two souls, but expands, like ripples in a still pond, into the vast collective. This is the paradox of true connection. The deeper we go into the particular, the closer we come to the eternal. In the alchemy of their bond, the lovers become not just participants in their own stories, but stewards of a greater narrative, one that speaks to the healing of humanity itself. Their love ceases to be merely a private comfort and becomes a vessel for something far greater, a sanctuary of transformation, a living archetype of what is possible when consciousness replaces the hunger for control. At first, this expansion is unsettling. The ego, accustomed to its narrow focus, resists the call to serve something beyond itself. Love for the ego is often a transaction. What do I gain? What do I lose? But as the bond deepens, the ego is gently dismantled. It is asked to surrender its grasp, to relinquish its demands, to dissolve into the larger rhythm of life. The lovers come to see that their union was never solely about their happiness. It was a crucible, preparing them for a greater work. This greater work begins subtly, often invisibly. A conversation that opens the heart of a stranger, a shared presence that brings solace to those in despair. The relationship itself becomes a beacon, quietly radiating the truth that transformation is possible, that love can indeed be a force for healing rather than harm. In this way, the bond transcends its personal dimensions, becoming a living expression of the archetype of the sacred union. In mythology, we see echoes of this truth. Psyche and Eros, the divine lovers, do not merely find fulfillment in each other. Their union restores balance to the cosmos. The sacred marriage of heaven and earth, sun and moon, yin and yang, is not just a symbol of harmony. It is a blueprint for the reconciliation of opposites in the human soul. The lovers, in their journey together, become vessels for this reconciliation, embodying the potential for wholeness that lies within every being. This transcendence does not mean abandoning the personal. Rather, it infuses the personal with a depth and meaning that it could not have held before. The mundane rituals of daily life, shared meals, quiet conversations, even moments of conflict, take on a sacred quality. They become opportunities to embody love in action, to live out the principles that the bond demands. Every interaction becomes a chance to practice compassion, to extend grace, to honor the humanity in oneself and the other. Through this archetypal lens, the beloved is no longer just a partner, but an initiator, a guide into the mysteries of the self and the cosmos. They are eros, the divine force that awakens desire not for mere possession, but for transcendence. They are psyche, the soul in its yearning, its vulnerability, its courage to undertake the journey toward the divine. Together, they enact the drama of love's eternal unfolding, their bond a thread in the vast tapestry of human connection. And yet, to live this archetypal story is not to be subsumed by it. The challenge of love is to balance the universality of the myth with the uniqueness of the individual bond. Each love story, while echoing the great patterns, is also singular, carved from the particularities of two lives, two histories, two souls. The myths guide, but do not dictate. They illuminate, but do not confine. The lovers must find their own way, their own rhythm, within the vast symphony of love's archetypal foundation. To recognize the archetypal foundation is to understand that love is not merely an emotion, but a sacred task, a calling to participate in the eternal work of creation and transformation. It is to see that every kiss, every argument, every moment of tenderness and strife is part of a larger story. A story that is both ancient and ever new, both universal and uniquely ours. And so the lovers stand not as isolated figures, but as participants in the great myths of existence. Their bond is a living expression of these timeless themes, a testament to the enduring power of love to unite, to challenge, to heal, and to transform. Through their connection, they are not only joined to each other, but to the collective human experience, their love, a bridge between the personal and the eternal, the individual and the universal, the fleeting and the infinite. To love deeply, in the truest sense, is to step into a crucible, a place where the soul's raw elements meet the alchemical fires of transformation. This is not the soft glow of romance as the world imagines it, nor the fleeting intoxication of passion. It is the profound, often arduous process of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who we truly are. The soul bond, then, is not merely a vessel for comfort or fleeting joy. It is a sacred forge where the dross of the ego is burned away to reveal the gold of authentic selfhood. When two aligned souls meet, they recognize in each other not only a beloved, but a catalyst, a mirror that reflects both the beauty and the brokenness within, the divine spark and the shadowed corners of the psyche. In this bond, the familiar patterns of the ego are challenged. The beloved becomes an unsettling force, shaking the foundations of what we thought we knew about ourselves. This is not the rupture of destruction, but the tremor of growth, the necessary shattering of illusions that no longer serve. Love, in its highest form, does not allow us to remain small. It insists on expansion, on evolution, on the courage to face ourselves fully. Here lies the paradox. To love another deeply is to be called into the depths of our own solitude. For individuation is not a path that can be walked in tandem. It is a solitary pilgrimage into the wilderness of the self. And yet, the presence of the beloved acts as a lantern in this wilderness, illuminating the terrain we must traverse alone. They do not walk the path for us, but their light reveals the next step. This dynamic is not without its struggles. To serve as a catalyst for another's growth is both an honor and a burden. It requires fierce tenderness, a love strong enough to withstand the storms of transformation and tender enough to hold space for the vulnerability it unveils. It demands unwavering commitment, not to the idea of the other, but to their becoming, to the unfolding of their truest self. The process of mutual individuation is a dance of opposites. It requires both proximity and distance, connection and autonomy. Too much fusion, and the fire of transformation is smothered. Too much separation, and the crucible loses its heat. The lovers must navigate this tension with care, honoring the delicate balance that allows both to thrive. This is not an easy journey. The wounds of the past, the defenses of the ego, the fears of abandonment and rejection all rise to the surface in the presence of such an intimate bond. But these obstacles are not barriers to love. They are its work. The beloved does not heal our wounds for us, but holds the space in which we can do so ourselves. They witness our pain without flinching, our growth without envy, our becoming without expectation. The individuation catalyst is not always gentle. It can feel like fire, like flood, like a tearing apart. But within this intensity lies the seed of transformation. Just as the chrysalis must dissolve into chaos before the butterfly can emerge, so too must the lovers allow themselves to be undone. They must trust that the process, though painful, is leading them toward wholeness. And what is wholeness if not the union of all that we are, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability, masculine and feminine? The beloved, in their role as catalyst, helps us to integrate these opposites within ourselves. Through their love, we come to see that we are not fragments but a vast, interconnected whole, containing multitudes. This is the gift of the soul bond. It does not complete us, for we are already whole. Instead, it reveals our wholeness to us, reflecting the fullness of our being in a way that we cannot see alone. It challenges us to claim our authentic selfhood, to stand in the truth of who we are, no matter how vulnerable or uncertain that truth may feel. The journey of mutual individuation is not linear. It is cyclical, spiraling ever deeper into the layers of the self. There are moments of clarity and connection, moments of doubt and disconnection, but through it all, the love remains. A steady flame that burns not for possession or control, but for the sheer beauty of witnessing the other's becoming. In the end, the purpose of the soul bond is not to make us happy, but to make us whole. It is a crucible for transformation, a sacred space where two souls can grow into the fullness of their potential. It is a love that does not bind but liberates, a love that does not demand but inspires, a love that does not fix but heals. And so, the lovers stand together, not as halves seeking completion, but as whole beings, each holding the space for the other's unfolding. Their love is not the destination, but the journey, not the answer, but the question, not the end, but the beginning of a lifelong dance of becoming. In their bond, they find not only each other, but themselves, and in themselves, the infinite. There comes a moment in every deep union where the boundary between the personal and the universal begins to dissolve. What once seemed a private endeavor, the tender unfolding of two lives intertwined, suddenly reveals its larger purpose. The love that binds is no longer confined to the intimate world of two souls, but expands, like ripples in a still pond, into the vast collective. This is the paradox of true connection. The deeper we go into the particular, the closer we come to the eternal. In the alchemy of their bond, the lovers become not just participants in their own stories, but stewards of a greater narrative, one that speaks to the healing of humanity itself. Their love ceases to be merely a private comfort and becomes a vessel for something far greater, a sanctuary of transformation, a living archetype of what is possible when consciousness replaces the hunger for control. At first, this expansion is unsettling. The ego, accustomed to its narrow focus, resists the call to serve something beyond itself. Love for the ego is often a transaction. What do I gain? What do I lose? But as the bond deepens, the ego is gently dismantled. It is asked to surrender its grasp, to relinquish its demands, to dissolve into the larger rhythm of life. The lovers come to see that their union was never solely about their happiness. It was a crucible, preparing them for a greater work. This greater work begins subtly, often invisibly. A conversation that opens the heart of a stranger, a shared presence that brings solace to those in despair. The relationship itself becomes a beacon, quietly radiating the truth that transformation is possible, that love can indeed be a force for healing rather than harm. In this way, the bond transcends its personal dimensions, becoming a living expression of the archetype of the sacred union. In mythology, we see echoes of this truth. Psyche and Eros, the divine lovers, do not merely find fulfillment in each other. Their union restores balance to the cosmos. The sacred marriage of heaven and earth, sun and moon, yin and yang, is not just a symbol of harmony. It is a blueprint for the reconciliation of opposites in the human soul. The lovers, in their journey together, become vessels for this reconciliation, embodying the potential for wholeness that lies within every being. This transcendence does not mean abandoning the personal. Rather, it infuses the personal with a depth and meaning that it could not have held before. The mundane rituals of daily life, shared meals, quiet conversations, even moments of conflict, take on a sacred quality. They become opportunities to embody love in action, to live out the principles that the bond demands. Every interaction becomes a chance to practice compassion, to extend grace, to honor the humanity in oneself and the other. The sanctuary of their relationship becomes a healing space, not just for the lovers, but for all who enter its orbit. Friends, family, even strangers feel its resonance, often without understanding why. There is a stillness, a presence, a quiet power that emanates from the bond, drawing others toward their own potential for transformation. The relationship becomes a microcosm of what is possible in the world, a place where wounds can be acknowledged without judgment, where differences can be held without division, where love can exist without conditions. To transcend the personal does not mean erasing individuality. It means anchoring individuality in the larger whole. The lovers do not lose themselves in their union. Rather, they find a deeper sense of self through it. Their individuation, far from being diminished, is magnified as they see how their unique gifts contribute to the collective. Their love becomes a creative force, birthing not only their own growth, but the possibility of growth for all who are touched by it. In this expanded space, the lovers begin to understand the true nature of commitment. It is not a cage, not a set of obligations, but a choice to show up again and again, not only for each other but for the world they are helping to create. Commitment becomes a form of devotion, a sacred act of service to the unfolding of life itself. It is not a duty but a privilege, a way of saying yes to the profound mystery of existence. As the bond matures, it becomes clear that the relationship is not an end but a means of participating in the great work of humanity's healing. The lovers are not saviors, they are witnesses, co-creators, channels through which the energy of transformation flows. Their love, in transcending the personal, becomes a quiet revolution, a testament to the power of consciousness to reshape the world. And yet, this transcendence is not without its challenges. To serve the collective requires an ongoing surrender, a willingness to let go of what is comfortable, to embrace the unknown. It demands humility, for the work is never truly complete. The lovers must continually return to the personal, to the intimate, to the vulnerable spaces where transformation begins. They must hold the paradox of being both individuals and part of something far greater, both grounded in the present and connected to the eternal. In the end, the transcendence of the personal is not a destination, but a practice, a way of being, that honors the sacred in every moment, every interaction, every breath. It is a reminder that love, at its highest expression, is not about possession, but liberation. It is not about what we can take, but what we can give. It is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming whole. And so the lovers continue their journey, not as isolated beings, but as participants in the great unfolding of life. Their love, no longer confined to the boundaries of self and other, becomes a bridge between the personal and the universal, between the individual and the collective, between the finite and the infinite. It is a love that transcends, a love that heals, a love that endures. It is said that love, at its essence, is not a line but a circle. And yet, the circle is no mere repetition, no endless loop of sameness. It is a spiral, a pattern that returns again and again, but never to the exact place it began. This is the nature of the unbreakable bond between aligned souls, not a destination reached, but a continuous unfolding, a sacred rhythm of meeting, separating, and meeting again, each cycle, drawing them deeper into the mystery of one another and themselves. The eternal return is not a path of ease. It demands that we surrender to the tides of love, tides that rise and recede, shaping the shores of our souls with every wave. In the beginning, it is tempting to cling to the meeting, to resist the inevitable separation. But to hold too tightly is to deny the nature of love itself, which thrives not in stasis, but in motion. The dance of connection and release is what breathes life into the bond, allowing it to grow, transform, and endure. At each turning of the spiral, the souls face the paradoxes of love anew. How can something so fragile endure the storms of existence? How can something so vast fit within the confines of two human hearts? These questions have no final answers, only deeper invitations to explore. Each cycle of return offers an opportunity to hold these paradoxes with greater grace, to expand the capacity for love even as it tests the boundaries of understanding. In mythology, we see this spiral dance reflected in the stories of the eternal lovers, Orpheus and Eurydice, separated by the veil of death, the cosmic union of Shiva and Shakti, whose dance creates and dissolves worlds. These tales remind us that love is both a union and a separation, a meeting that is always accompanied by the possibility of loss. Yet it is in the willingness to face this loss, to walk the descent into the unknown, that love finds its greatest strength. For aligned souls, each separation is not an ending but a chrysalis, a space where transformation occurs in the quiet, unseen depths. It is here that the soul grows, shedding the old skin of ego and fear, preparing to meet the beloved anew. And when the meeting comes, it is never the same as before. The eyes that gaze upon each other now hold the weight of all that has been learned, the scars of battles fought, and the wisdom of lessons integrated. This is the gift of the eternal return. It is a journey of refinement. Each cycle polishes the bond, like a river smoothing a stone, removing the rough edges of expectation and illusion. What remains is not a perfect love, but a true one. A love that can hold the light and the shadow, the joy and the sorrow, the fullness and the emptiness. It is a love that does not demand completion, but celebrates the beauty of becoming. The spiral nature of the bond also mirrors the process of individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming one's true self. Just as the soul must meet and integrate its shadow, so too must the bond between aligned souls confront its dark corners. These moments of confrontation are not failures, but necessary rites of passage. They are the crucibles in which the bond is tested and strengthened, the fires through which it emerges more luminous. As the spiral turns, the bond begins to transcend the limitations of time and space. It becomes eternal not because it never changes, but because it never ceases to grow. The love shared between the souls becomes a living thing, evolving with them, reflecting their inner transformations. It is not bound by the moments of meeting or parting. It exists in the spaces between, in the silent understanding that endures even when words are absent. The final paradox of the eternal return is this: the more the bond grows, the more it reveals the infinite nature of love itself. The souls come to see that their connection is not separate from the greater whole, but is part of the vast web of existence. Their love, unique and personal, is also universal, a thread woven into the tapestry of life. Each return deepens their awareness of this truth, grounding them in the sacred and the mundane, the personal and the cosmic. In the end, the eternal return is not a journey to an external destination, but a homecoming to the heart of being. The spiral does not lead outward, but inward, drawing the souls closer to the essence of who they are and to the divine mystery that binds all things. It is a reminder that love is not something to be achieved or possessed, but something to be lived moment by moment, cycle by cycle, and so the dance continues, the meeting, the parting, the meeting again, each turn of the spiral, a step in the infinite dance of love. It is a dance without conclusion, a song without an end, a flame that burns not to consume but to illuminate. In the eternal return, the souls find their place not just in each other's lives, but in the great unfolding of existence itself. And there, in the timeless rhythm of love, they are home. When two souls align in sacred union, their bond transcends the boundaries of personal love and enters the realm of myth. This is not love as the world defines it, fleeting and transactional. It is a love that roots itself in the depths of being, intertwining with the eternal rhythms of existence. Such love leaves behind more than memories. It creates a legacy, a living resonance that ripples outward, touching lives far beyond its immediate embrace. The story of aligned souls is not merely a private tale. It is a testament to what is possible when two beings choose each other again and again, not out of convenience, but out of truth. Their love becomes a beacon, a lighthouse casting its steady glow across the stormy seas of human longing. For those who seek authentic connection, it stands as living proof that the soul's deepest desires can find fulfillment without sacrificing individuality or freedom. Each moment of conscious choice strengthens this legacy. In the grand crescendos of love, the vows exchanged under starlit skies, the passionate declarations that seem to halt time, it is easy to glimpse eternity. But it is in the quieter moments, the ordinary Tuesday afternoons, that the true power of sacred union reveals itself. These are the moments when love chooses to show up, not because it is dramatic or dazzling, but because it is real. In mythology, the legacy of sacred union often manifests as the creation of a new world. Think of Gaia and Uranus, whose union birthed the Titans, or the alchemical marriage that transforms base elements into gold. Aligned souls participate in this same creative act. Their love becomes a generative force, not only for their own lives, but for the collective psyche. It whispers to others, "This is possible. Love can be whole even in a fractured world."